This story downright pissed me off, and it should downright piss you off too. If it doesn't, then you don't have a pulse. In fact, if you live in my country of the UK where this took place, and this doesn't scare you, then you don't have a brain. So, if you thought that all this social justice crap and this politically correct crap wasn't going to do anything outside of colleges and universities, and social media, that it wasn't going to have any effect anywhere else and so it could just safely be ignored, try telling that to this guy. This is Mark Meechan, more commonly known by his YouTuber name Count Dankula. He has just been convicted. Not fined, not just arrested, but actually convicted of, get this, being offensive on the internet. He could get up to a year in prison for being offensive on the internet. Just let that sink in. This is where we are at now in my country. We're at a point where we actually have YouTuber Count Dankula convicted over a joke. #FreeDankula. A popular YouTuber was convicted of a hate crime in Britain on Tuesday after teaching a pet dog to give a Nazi salute and posting the video online. So, just to give some context here, something that was sadly lacking in the courtroom, as you'll see, he actually said at the beginning of the video in question, that his girlfriend was always going on about how cute she thought the dog was, so he decided that he would try and make it into the most uncute thing he could think of. A Nazi. Mark Meechan, better known as Count Dankula, was found guilty under the Communications Act after posting a video showing his girlfriend's dog reacting to phrases such as "Sieg Heil" and "Gas the Jews" with what appears to be a Nazi salute. That's the scary thing. I checked the wording of the Communications Act, specifically Section 127 of it, and according to what it says, they indeed were within their rights to convict him. Which means I have one thing to say to the powers that be, above all else. Repeal Section 127. Now. I mean, just look at this totalitarian, authoritarian shit. 1. A person is guilty of an offense if he a. sends by means of a public electronic communications network, a message or other matter that is grossly offensive or of an indecent, obscene or menacing character. Or b. causes any such message or matter to be so sent. Grossly offensive. And who gets to decide what is and isn't grossly offensive? Different people are offended by different things. I've mentioned that before. Personally, I think this damn law is itself grossly offensive. This law and this verdict have set a dangerous precedent that is now going to have everyone in my country who knows about this walking on eggshells all the time, because they know that if they say the wrong thing to the wrong person that they could have the police knocking on their door. Let's be clear here. This is not just some far-left professor spouting conspiracy theories about the patriarchy or white privilege. This is not just some group of indoctrinated communist students shouting down a speaker with whom they disagree politically. This is a man having been arrested, and possibly going to prison, losing his freedom, for up to a year, for a joke video. A joke video. This is social justice for you. This is what it does. This is the harm that it does. Don't ever let anyone tell you that it's a force for good. It isn't. It's a force for evil. Anyway, back to the news story. Sheriff Derek O'Carroll said Meechan's video was grossly offensive. There's that phrase again. Grossly offensive. And yes, I've seen bits of the video in question and it is quite edgy. But so what? Offensiveness is not a justification for a draconian reaction such as this. It's not a justification for a reaction at all as far as the law is concerned. Being offensive should not be a crime, and the fact that it is a gross violation of the basic human rights of freedom of speech and, more broadly, freedom of expression. Rights that I thought that we had in this country. But apparently not. Sheriff Derek O'Carroll said Meechan's video was grossly offensive, and did not buy the man's defense that it was merely a joke to annoy his girlfriend, the Herald Scotland reported. No, because it's not like he came on right at the start of the video and said precisely that or anything, is it? Oh, wait, that's exactly what he did. So just to add insult to injury, this sheriff is calling him a liar. Despite the evidence. The YouTuber's case became widely known after he was arrested in 2016 when the video went viral. Yes, I gather that he only had originally intended it to be viewed by a few friends and family, so maybe he should have had it set to private or unlisted or something, but then, it's easy to be wise after the event. Actually, something that this story doesn't mention, but that some other incarnations of it on other news sites do, is that nobody complained. Not one person. The police had to be their own complainant, which you would think would make his arrest unlawful. Suzanne Kelly, the girlfriend, defended Meechan last year in court, saying he is not anti-Semitic and has always been very supportive towards minority groups, according to the paper. The dog will lift his paw to virtually anything if he gets a treat for it. I would imagine that most dogs would. We have taught him to lift his paw to food, like ham or cheese, she also said in court. They were just words to make him lift his paw, and I know those words were used in the context of the video, which this sheriff deliberately, willfully ignored. Tuesday's shock verdict prompted support from comedian Ricky Gervais, who tweeted, "A man has been convicted in a UK court of making a joke that was deemed grossly offensive. If you don't believe in a person's right to say things that you might find grossly offensive, then you don't believe in freedom of speech." And he's quite right. No one has the right to not be offended. No one. And I'll tell you who else has spoken out in support of Dankula. David Baddiel. Who's Jewish, by the way. Speaking after the verdict, Meechan said, "There has been a huge miscarriage of justice. I'll say, the real crime is that he was ever arrested in the first place. I think it is a very, very dark day in terms of freedom of speech and freedom of expression. One of the primary things that must be considered in cases like this is context and intent, and today context and intent were completely disregarded," he continued. Exactly. Context is absolutely everything in a case like this, and as I said, this sheriff deliberately, willfully ignored it, despite the evidence of what the context was being right there on the video. But no, he acted like he was telepathic or something. Like he could read Dankula's mind and tell him what he was thinking. Never try to tell someone else what they are or were thinking. You don't know what they are or were thinking. Only they do. They tell you what they are or were thinking, not the other way around. For the system to actually disregard such things means that your actions no longer matter. They decide what your context and intent is. Well, it wasn't the system that disregarded the context, it was this sheriff, Derek O'Carroll. He maliciously disregarded the context of the video, despite that requiring him to ignore part of its content, and acted like he could read Dankula's mind all to get the result that he wanted. Is that even legal? Deliberately disregarding obviously relevant evidence. Could this sheriff not get into trouble himself for that? After all, it's not mentioned in this particular report, but Dankula did say that he planned to appeal. For any comedians making jokes in Britain, I'd be very, very worried about your future, because the context and intent, apparently they don't matter anymore. Yes. If this is anything to go by, then it will have pretty much killed a lot of comedy in the UK. I wonder if they're going to go out and arrest John Cleese for that Fawlty Towers episode now. Meechan's sentencing date is set for April the 23rd. Again, let that sink in. His sentencing date. He faces having a permanent criminal record, and possibly up to a year of prison time, for being offensive on the internet. This is not acceptable. Repeal Section 127. Repeal Section 127. Repeal Section 127.